Laura, and thank you everyone for coming along. First of all, I'd like the panellists to introduce each other, and we'll start off with Andrea. A little bit about yourself, please.
Okay, my name's Andrea Winders, and I call myself an urban disruptor these days, but I think I've been an urban disruptor all my life. I love technology, and I love technology that can help people. I'm not particularly a techie that writes technology, but I like to apply it and use it.
Fantastic, thank you, Andrea. We'll then go with Tony.
Hi there, I'm the CEO of data science, artificial intelligence, software development company called Neural Rays AI. Before that, 10 years experience as a CIO, digital transformation director and an enterprise architect in the AEC, or the architecture, engineering and construction industry, with firms such as Arup Atkins and WSP. My career all before that was in commercial software development and technology consulting. I like to lead on digital innovation, digital workplace, and digital transformation in general.
Fantastic, thank you very much. Sutha.
Hi, I'm Sutha Siva. I'm the COO at Manx Telecom. I've been, all my career has been in telecommunications and technology. I started off on the engineering side, and for the last, God knows how many ever long years, it's been more on the commercial and operational side. Been involved with what was M2M, now IoT, for the last 12, 15 years, and it's all about been about how do you actually make that as a service that people can use and leverage better from.
Fantastic, thank you. Garth.
Well, I was hoping that you would leave me for last, because I will not be the one to talk so much about a career in technology. I'm Garth Dallas. I run a company called Dallas Legal and Business Consulting. And today I'm here in my capacity as the head of collaborations for the Good Business Festival, which will be held in Liverpool City region in October this year and March 2021. But the link is that technology is an important aspect of what we will be featuring in the festival. But having said that, in my early days, I qualified as a chemical control engineer many moons back. I know it doesn't look on my face, but back then we were talking about artificial intelligence in designing chemical factories. Suffice to say, I never built a career in that, but I'm pretty much about humans and how we get the human spirit in everything that we do and link that into a sense of well-being and a sense of belonging, utilizing technology and everything else, which is a Good Business Festival I'll talk to you about later on.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Garth. And Jason.
Hi, my name is Jason Scales. I'm the Chief Executive of the Isle of Man's Blockchain Incubator. I had my first tech business when I was 12. I've only really ever had my own tech businesses. I've had 6, 7 in that time, most of which I've sold on quite successfully. So my main responsibility is the growth and development of blockchain and emerging technology sectors, which also includes IoT in the Isle of Man, and also facilitating investment into those sectors as well.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, panel. So my first question is, how has the pandemic affected your organization's work practices, and what new technologies have you, your clients and colleagues, embraced in order for you to adapt? And we'll start with Sutha first, I think.
Right. Yeah. So what I think what COVID did was over the last 3-4 years, as a company, we put in invested in technologies that enable us to work in flexible manner, remote working, working from home, all of those sort of things, making the most of cloud, etc. But as with all of these things, you never actually use it in anger. You know, it's a capability that's there and it's sitting there. And quite honestly, I don't think we used it anywhere near what it had to offer. When the lockdown happened, over a course of 48 hours, we went from, as an organization that was fully office-based to fully remote-based. And, you know, there were a few teething problems, like But apart from that, in 48 hours, we're fully operational on a remote basis. So I think the fact that we had made those technology choices enabled us to do that. So for us, the key learning was that was not that any new technologies we put in, it was just using what we had. And you realize how much of technology you have access to that actually enables you to work in different ways and flexible ways, but we simply weren't using it.
Brilliant. And Tony?
Yeah, thanks, Brendan. Neural Rays, we're 70 people and growing, but we're based in the UK, India, and Germany. And right from the outset of the lockdown, all of our people have been home working regardless of location. Fortunately, I think as we just heard there as well, all of our infrastructure that we needed was already in place. You know, Office 365, Teams, Slack, Zoom, and a lot more too. We're engaging with our clients and doing business development with prospective clients, using either our own video conferencing technology, Teams is our default, but we're also using Zoom, Cisco WebEx, Google Meet, whatever it is that the clients need. And that's been a pretty smooth process throughout. And for me, you know, pre-pandemic, always work for me has been what you do, not where you're at. So I'd rather the phrase I work for a company, not at a company. You know, it's a one-word difference, but it's a difference that means a lot. And, you know, from what I've seen ourselves and working with our clients is that this new normal that we're in now, it's proved a great leveler. And it's really supporting a sort of a democratization of the workplace. You know, for example, there's no longer a prestige in being based at the corporate HQ. And your company hierarchy pretty quickly disappears when you're all just talking rectangles on a screen. But we haven't answered everything yet. You know, if this new way of working is going to persist for the long term, you know, this is more from my clients actually asking the question of us, but what do they do with all that expensive technology languishing in their offices? And also, how do we support our home workers better who don't necessarily have the infrastructure in place to do their jobs as effectively as we would all wish? We're recruiting pretty aggressively at the moment. We're doing that all virtually, and it hasn't happened yet, but who knows? I can predict that before long, we're going to start getting CVs coming in with candidates boasting about their home broadband speed. I can just see that happening.
Absolutely. So the corner office is no longer the badge of honor.
Indeed.
Absolutely.
Indeed so, yeah.
Andrea, from your perspective, what do you think?
Well, actually, I don't have an office. I've never had an office. So there's been very little effect on me and how I work with people within my organisation. What I have noticed, though, is I've saved an absolute fortune and helped the environment by not travelling down to London for a 1-hour meeting. And I will never, ever pick that up again. I'm now a Zoometta, if that's a word. And I will be doing a lot of my London work over the internet, which is something that I always felt I had to go down and meet people face to face. So that's probably one of the biggest changes that I've had. I found it really, really exciting to be remote. And actually, I've signed up a whole new region to work with while we've been off, and I haven't actually met them. So it's been great. One of the downsides that I've found is that early days, particularly, some of the organisations that I was working with external to myself switched off. And it's only now that they're coming back online and answering emails and getting in touch, and et cetera, et cetera. But yeah, in a strange way, I've actually quite enjoyed the digital side of lockdown, because it's given me the freedom that I've always worked with and extended that beyond just me and my small circle to contacts as well. So yeah, it's been life as normal, but not as you know it.
Yeah, no, I can agree with that. I'm a lot more productive on various projects. One of the ones I'm working on is changing streams. And we used to go into Liverpool University for an hour meeting, and it was an hour to get there, an hour to get back. You know, and it was a waste of, like I say, carbon, time. But we've got to balance that between the human interaction and the efficiencies. And I think that's probably, we'll come on to that a bit more as we discuss. Garth.
From my legal consulting practice, it's nothing new, because I've always kept it lean, and it's always been around ensuring that we have access to technology to link in with the projects that we're working on. Lawyers, solicitors firms have had various problems around that, because it's still an old dragon believing that you have to have this high maintenance office and all of that stuff. But from a few years back, we had already changed our model to ensure that we're lean. But from a good business festival perspective, which is a project with the Liverpool City region, and within that, we've got 2 delivery partners, Hemingway Group, which is based down in London, and Liverpool City Council, Culture Liverpool. And I was based in Cunard Building on the 4th floor, and you had about 500 people on one floor, and overnight we literally had to empty the floor, and everyone started to work from home. But guess what? The infrastructure was in place, and I was very, very impressed as to how quickly it was back to life as normal, because yes, we all had Office 365, we have HubSpot, we have Basecamp. There was absolutely nothing around how we were managing this project, which meant that we all had to be in the same place in the Cunard building. And we have got on like a house on fire. We've had all the stuff about, young children turning up on Zoom meetings and dogs barking. But you know what? It made our team meetings even more interesting and even more human. And we have had to change the way we're going to deliver the festival from a multi-event event in October. It's going to be a virtual event. We've been hopping on and off various platforms to see what works, what doesn't work. Are we going to do a hybrid event? And you know what? If we were given the option to deliver the festival in the way we're going to deliver it now, i.e. with that virtual platform, which we're now using a local Liverpool business to develop. So it's more tapping into the technology which is available local. For us, it has really worked well. And I genuinely believe that this has been one of the positive unintended consequences of the problem that we've been through.
Brilliant, Garth. And Jason, from the Isle of Man's perspective, a slightly different environment, I would have thought.
Yeah, I mean, I am a technologist, okay? So what I'm about to say will disagree with that completely. So from an Isle of Man perspective, we've been COVID-free here for 45 days. And so compared to any of you that are in the UK, for example, we actually have first-hand insight onto what actually will people start to do once you start to return back to normal. And the reality is that I think we're going to end this 12-month period where, yes, everyone can parade Zoom, Teams, whatever it is. But I don't know about anybody else. When it comes to conferences, I travel to attend and sometimes speak at conferences quite a bit throughout the year. I spend a lot of time traveling, and I've tried to attend virtual conferences, and if I'm honest, they just don't work. Business, to me, is successfully achieved via the face-to-face interaction of people and any of you that have successfully attended a conference before will know that most of it's not done on the conference floor. It's done in the evening over a gentle drink or whatever it is. Most of the deals that you do will normally be based in that environment, and they're not getting done in the same way in a virtual kind of conference level. I think we're already starting to see here a backwards trend where, yes, people can now go back to their offices, they can now go to the pub, they can go to a cafe, they can go to a restaurant, and we're getting back to our old habits very quickly. As a business, our core is bums on seats. We have to land jobs and people in the Isle of Man. So the idea that we can succeed in bringing new technology businesses here remotely just doesn't work, because the reality is that we need them here in order to succeed as a jurisdiction, and for the businesses to succeed, they have to be here. We have compliance with the EU substance requirements and all these other things we have to adhere to. And we can only do that in a physical interaction setting. We've adapted to help our businesses. We've got a substantial kind of real estate portfolio that sits around physically supporting our businesses. And we've had to adapt that side of the business as well, because we've had to engineer internally. Zoom, Teams, all these things, they come with a cost. So our focus has gone from bring new business to the Isle of Man and support growth to now rescue mode. We've literally been in panic and rescue mode for the last 3 to 4 months, where we've been internally adapting to deliver in-house software for people to conduct video conferencing without the additional cost of Zoom and Teams, internal social networking, so the businesses that are within the incubator can continue to dialogue with each other. And you know, we've just kind of pushed a big update on that, and it looks really great, and it's worked really well. So for me, I think all this talk around we'll never travel for business and we'll never do conferences in person again, I genuinely think it's a bit of a 12-month scheme, if that. I genuinely think we'll all go back to a point where we're all jumping on the train, we're all flying, and we're all going back to physical conferences again. Yes, we've had to adapt for a short-term need, but it's just a very expedited technology change bubble that I'm pretty confident will pop at some point in the next 12 months.
Just on that point, Jason, I absolutely agree that you can't beat the face-to-face, and we can't wait to get back to the bitter lunches on the Isle of Man, because I know they are legendary. And people do business with people do business with people. Yes. And it is face-to-face. And yes, you can do a certain amount and you can be extremely productive using technology, but we have to understand the physical side and the human side of how we interact as a species. So it is a balance. And just on that one, I'm going to jump a few questions. How do you think our communities are going to look in the future? I'm thinking specifically about the high street and business districts as we adapt to this new change. And I'll start with Garth on this one.
Listen, the original question, the one before, was about how we've adapted. I don't believe for one moment that it will be like this forever. And I did say it's one of the unintended positives, but there have been many negatives as well. And we all have to adopt. It's a pandemic. No one planned for it, but business has to go on. And in terms of communities and how will our communities look, it will look completely different. And I don't think we'll ever get back to the communities looking exactly as they were pre-COVID. We will get used to having conversations about pre-COVID and post-COVID. And when I say that, I'm talking about positives and negatives. I believe social distancing will continue longer than just 12 months. I think that will go on for a while yet, and there will be various communities which are disproportionately affected as a result of that. For example, the elderly communities, communities that are in rural, isolated areas, there will be some differences in terms of how we interact. Having said that, how many of us now know a little bit more about our neighbors just by being involved with this knockdown? How many people now look out for what's going on in their neighborhood and be a little bit more vigilant in ensuring that we're a little bit more compassionate and look after others? So there will be positives and negatives. The communities will never, ever get back to what we had before. And I don't use the word the new normal. I use the phrase the next normal, because there will be a series of next normals until at some point we will have somewhat of a settling down period, if you like. So there will be significant changes, some positive and some negative.
Brilliant, Garth. And Sutha, from your perspective?
So I think from my perspective, I do agree, this is not going to change radically. This is how we were operating during the lockdown period is how we are going to be operating in the future. But I think what this provided us, doesn't matter which part of our life, was to examine what are the things that can be done in different ways, and what is a different mix to the mix we have today, right? So I think what we will see is a change in mix, not from one spectrum to the other spectrum. It's just a change in mix. And, we would have each business, each individual would have discovered certain things that they want to make change, which helps them, helps the business or helps the individual improve whatever the, be it from a life-work balance perspective, how we operate, how are we more efficient, all of those sort of things. So it is a change of mix. So and I think COVID was a good opportunity to examine that. And if anything, I think that's what we should be doing, maybe on an annual basis or every 6 months, both on a personal basis and a business basis. Are we always, because we are very good at taking for granted what we've been doing, because that's what we've done for the last 30 years, and we want to keep doing it. So I just see it as a mixed change for the better. And so, human interaction, absolutely, So 4 months ago, we were an organization that was fully office-based, because if you weren't in the office, were you really working, right? To the next norm, as Garth said, is, we recognize that every individual in the organization has a different role and has their own personal needs. So what we were trying to put in place is a hybrid model of flexibility, that there is a need to be in the office with contact, but that doesn't have to be all that, it doesn't need to be set for every person as do it 9 to 5, Monday to Friday.
Absolutely agree. Yeah. Absolutely agree. Tony, from your perspective?
Probably echo what we just heard from Garth and Sutha. I mean, the world is going through a massive transformation. I think we'd all agree with that. I suggest we're still perhaps globally in the early stages of dealing with the pandemic. I don't like to say that, but I see social distancing, as Garth said, going on for some time. For me, much of my working life has been spent in London, and that's meant a 3-hour daily round trip commute. But I would say during that time, I've loved the vibe of the city. I've loved those spontaneous meetups. I've loved, business meetings that carry on, into the evening in the pub or a restaurant. And I loved all that sort of team and client bonding that occurs in the process. And as Jason said earlier, the same applies to conferences. But the thing I haven't missed is that daily commute. And for me, being able to take a portion of my virtual working day out to do the school run, for example, at, either end of the day, it's been incredibly special, at a family level. And I don't really want to go back fully to those old ways of working. And most of the people I talk to, feel the same. And even people I'm interviewing to join us, are feeling that way. Yesterday, here in the UK, we had that news of Bella Italia and Café Rouge. I think it was going into administration, and they're both restaurants I've used in city centres for those spontaneous meetups. But, I've not been into central London. I've not even been on a train, since March. And, someone who was there only last week was saying the Strand looks like something like a ghost town at the moment. So I think going forward, a great deal of city, office space centre could be left dormant. It's too early to say, but that is a prediction. Commuter towns won't necessarily be commuter towns if people aren't commuting on that daily basis, which is going to change the dynamics in those town centres. But people will be freer to buy their dream home in the countryside or on the coast, if they feel that they're going to be able to work productively from there into the future. And these really are big changes, and it's probably too early to know exactly how things are going to pan out. And, we've got to also recognise that the gains that some are enjoying are not, really being shared equally by all. There are young workers in flat shares, for example, who just really aren't enjoying these current ways of working, and they can't wait to get back to, working in an office or a shared working space. So I think, Sutha used the phrase hybrid. I think we all agree things are probably never going to go back fully to the way they were in the past. And we do need some form of hybrid world, I think, coming out of this that brings together the best of yesterday's ways of working, which we all, are starting to miss now with sort of the cabin fever of working from home, combined with a much richer work-life balance that we're also enjoying today. And that I predict and hope is what emerges.
Yeah, I think there's going to be a huge opportunity for the unlocked talent which we have in the workforce. I'm thinking about back-to-work mums. I'm thinking about disabilities. I'm thinking about all of those where you can get more inclusion into it, because people can actually. It's proven now they can work from home. They can work from a home office, and they can work at their own pace at their own time. So I think that's going to be a very interesting thing to watch as we move forward. My Zoometta Andrea.
Right, okay, so I was already planning to disrupt the high streets and the business districts before we went into lockdown. I so hope we don't lose the community joy that we found joy in lockdown. I mean, I now term myself an urban walker because I do my hours walk around my local area, and I've seen things that I've never seen before. But one thing that I have done while we've been in lockdown, to look at what happens after this period, trying to imagine what we can do that can be good. We were building in Whitehaven, which is my test bed, a 100,000 square foot office block. And what I've persuaded the developers to do is not build a 100,000 square foot office block. And think about those people living in terrace properties or living in two downs or small apartments who are now home working or will be home working afterwards. How can we create a building that isn't an office block, but it's somewhere where they could work? It's mixed use, it's environmentally great. So you're using wind power in it. You have a stoya or something like that on the ground floor. So it's a really interesting space that can be mixed events, can market. So I'm just rethinking how we look at what we were building anyway and what we were developing. I was already working in robotics in cafes and in restaurants, and I think that that's something I'll probably pick up and try to move forward a lot more as we come out of this. One of your questions later applies to that, because I don't think it will cost jobs. Our local high streets in the area that I was working were already in decline. So it's a matter of how can we get that spirit, that community spirit locally, use technology to help our smaller retailers get online and keep our money local as well. So it's taking that community spirit that we've already got, embracing it, and using technology for good. I don't understand blockchain, Jason. I wish I did. I keep trying to. Maybe I'll come and have a lesson from you, because I see that blockchain has got a role to play with this as well. So I'm looking at Sardex at the moment, for example, as a local way of bartering, helping small businesses use the stock that they've got, that they, and just get everybody working together. So my hope is that we don't lose that community spirit, and that we use technology to make it easier, and then rethink buildings, make them beautiful, green, but sustainable, obviously, and commercially viable. That's my hope. And all those thousands of bikes that have been bought, push bikes that have been, I'm northern, push bikes, but cycles that have been bought during lockdown, don't put them in your garage, keep them out. Let's get everybody cycling. Let's get the cars off our town centre roads and make it more for people and the place that people want to come out. Start building parklets. Just think about life differently is what I hope, if only a little bit sticks.
Brilliant. And for someone who keeps a bike in his office, Jason,
Brendan, don't forget, I rode it down to my office at one point. I just seem to have failed to do anything with it for the last 6 months. I mean, to be honest, for me, it's quite where I am now, where our primary base is, we're pretty much flat bang near the high street in Central Douglas and the Isle of Man, and the business districts and the high street are intrinsically linked. Now, just because people go to shopping, I don't know where people like to shop, but Marks and Spencer's, TK Maxx, wherever it is on weekends, the fact is that in our place here in Douglas, that most of the places bustle because of the throughput of people in the business district. So the people that kind of go for lunch, the people that go shopping on their lunch in the daytime, you have, I think, Sutha's right. We will move towards this kind of hybrid model, which will impact both. And we are going to have to rethink our traditional real estate and how they do work together. We've already started to see on our main high street, Strand Street here, the change of properties been demolished and they're now being rebuilt into multi-purpose, multifunctional properties. I do think that there are certain challenges ahead for everybody who's in kind of any asset management of any description. But it's also a time to embrace technological change as well. Whilst there is less flow through our towns and through our cities, it's the perfect time to turn every town and city into a test bed. In the Isle of Man, we always pride ourselves on being a test bed for disruptive technology. But parts of the UK can look to embrace this as well. Whether you're looking at how AI implementations, the Isle of Man was talking at some point about testing an AI implementation of assessing meteorological conditions, road conditions, and traffic flow, on how that can impact traffic light management much, much, much further ahead toward the town of Douglas. And, it's the perfect time. We've got less traffic on the roads. and how we can start to look at how we implement that. The government is talking about how we can use AI technology in the main high street on tracking footfall better than it already does, and so on. And now's the time for us to say, you know what, we're nice and quiet, there's less people around, and let's turn our towns and cities into technological test beds, and then see how we kind of integrate them together. But you know, the two of them are intrinsically linked. There's no separation between high street footfall at weekends and business districts. They are very much rely upon each other to carry on working.
Can I just make a quick comment?
Yeah, absolutely.
Because Jason, one of the biggest footfalls from our business district tends to be local authority. Just because of what they are. I can tell you that 3 local authorities that I'm working with are not planning to go back into their offices. They're planning to sell their real estate or reallocate it. That is a really worrying trend for our town centres now and our high streets. So we've got to start thinking about how we combat things like that, a massive reduction in footfall, and what we can do to keep things moving in that economy.
Completely. What we don't realise is that it's counterproductive, and that is why there has to be much bigger joined up thinking, because it is so counterproductive that you've got councils and the government here and other places are doing the same thing. They don't realise that they're penalising the private sector, which is the very thing that they work to support. And you are absolutely right. They'll talk about spending on infrastructure for cycling and so on, but we're all every big firm in the Isle of Man is looking at downsizing its property portfolio, and I'm pretty sure Sutha that Manx Telecom are probably looking at doing the same thing, and that's just what we're moving towards. But that will have detrimental impacts on our economy going forward as well. Sorry, Garth.
Absolutely will have detrimental effect. Let's look at Liverpool City region, where I am and where the business festival is placed. Since 2008, the Liverpool Capital of Culture, there's been a massive regeneration across Liverpool City region, which has been based around the built environment. It's been based around our knowledge sector or universities, University of Liverpool in particular. Its business model is based on getting Chinese students into Liverpool. That has totally been shaken at its core. Those students who Liverpool is a student area, and when the students leave in the summer break, our high street is completely different. The amount that is spent. So there will be so many different knock-on negatives. But what the city is now doing, for example, is closing off certain streets. For example, Bowl Street is no longer accessible to traffic. So we're now allowing restaurants to extend their space onto the side pavements to allow for less, if you like, reaction to the reality of social distancing. And not just the reality of social distancing, but also the mindset in people's mind that I won't go out to the restaurant because I may potentially catch COVID as a result of that. So we have to think differently. And that's why I'm saying, as Sutha said, you know, it's going to be a hybrid. It's going to be a series of nexus. Some will do it right. Some will not get it so right. We believe, for example, St. Helens, where there's, you know, the St. Helens High Street has been in total decline. And there's been so many infrastructure being talked about and put in place just before COVID to rejuvenate St. Helens that they literally have to go back to the drawing board.
Yeah. So, Brendan, just if I may on this. So, I mean, it's a different way of looking at floor space and high street space and how we utilize it. So, for example, in our own offices, you know, 6 months ago, if we wanted to create more office space, that would have been, right, it's to put a desk there, right? Today, when we're talking about creating more office space, it is about creating a space for collaboration, right? So the value of how you use 1 square foot of office space is much higher. Similarly, in the high street, what you're seeing is a move away from footfall for pure transactional activity, towards footfall for more valued activity, right? More life affirming, more value to the economy, green, much more green. So yes, you may see that there is what is seen as perceived as a reduction of traditional footfall activity on the high street, but for the size of the high street, I think you're going to get far more value in that holistic sense. If you see what I mean? So we are closing parts of the high street, saying it's only for there's no traffic in it, but that then enables services, businesses, restaurants, outdoor living, much more green, the ability to cycle. So I think we have to look at different set of KPIs, if you want, on how we value our high streets and buildings.
I think the dynamics are different in different locations. Commuter towns or smaller towns may actually be doing better, and there may be a degree of repurposing going on, and that may carry on into the long term. There's a different story in cities where we're predominantly during the day populated by people working there, and I don't know the answer to that. What's going to happen there, and what's going to happen to transportation systems? So, we're in a country with our rail system funded largely through ticket sales, and if people are not buying those tickets, what happens to that? And there are a lot of questions that need to be answered, and the answers may prove to be different in different locations.
Yeah, absolutely. So again, one of the questions I was going to have, I'm going to rephrase the question. With all this surplus infrastructure and resource, and I'm going to combine it with the move towards automation, has business got an opportunity to take a lead in the community? And do employers more than ever have a civic duty for their corporate social responsibility to make sure that they balance their profit with purpose as against profit just for shareholders? And I'll start off with Garth on that one.
Absolutely correct. Business has a responsibility, but their responsibility, in my mind, is not based on corporate social responsibility. In my mind, that is an aged and old concept, because what happened is businesses, corporates in particular, would focus on shareholder value, build a lot of profit, and then go and paint a school or paint a church and say that they have met their corporate social responsibility. So what we're talking about here is the fact that the world has changed, the world is changing, and profit alone can no longer be the main consideration. There are many other P's. There is place, there is people, there is purpose. And that purpose can't be purpose washing, where you just put a purpose in place so you can generate a profit and say you've done well. And why is that important? Because consumers are now making a decision as to where they're going to spend their pound based on the purpose of the organization. Employees, millennials, are making decisions as to which company they're going to work for based on the purpose of that organization. Someone comes for an interview now and they're interviewing you rather than you interviewing them. That's the reality. And COVID has made that even more relevant. The other P is planet. We've got to make sure that we look after the planet and people make decisions as to where they're going to spend their dollar based on how those P's are embedded in a organization's culture. So purpose is important, and it is important because that's the only way corporates, only way businesses will survive and be sustainable. Some businesses will go out of business. We've got to accept that. Some will not survive. But what we're trying to engender here is a culture in which individuals and corporates understand that we're all connected. And the only way we are going to survive is if we have a purpose which is based on looking after our most important resource, which is our human resource, our people. And it's not just an HR function. This is based on having a complete culture within your organization.
Andrea.
So I've been lucky to be working in an area where social impact is really important, and where local businesses are almost forced to have a social impact element to their business. I wouldn't say it's perfect. I wouldn't say it always works, because some still do go off and paint the church hall or paint the fence. But on the whole, there has been a lot of social impact and social work already done within the area that I'm working, partly because there's a nuclear power plant up there. What I want to see post-COVID, though, is that have more meaning and have more measurable outcomes, positive outcomes for those who are being left behind. So the children who don't fit in school. So rather than the social impact fund, of which there's £10 million a year in the local area to fund social impact work, doesn't necessarily go to the big organisations who do the same old, but looks to do something differently, to encourage different members of the community to work in a different way, use the kids' skills who are sitting on the Game Boys. Or that's probably old-fashioned. I'm not a gamer. So sitting on their PlayStations, doing it, use their skills, give them the opportunity to make their own lives better. So I would like to see social impact. Yeah, CSR, tick a box. You know, I used to sell office supplies years ago, and I found an angle for selling it through CSR. And companies used to flock to me to put their office supplies orders my way so they could tick the box on CSR. So it's got to be genuine. They've got to mean it, and it's about actually things changing and impact, as opposed to just ticking the box. Because I'm with you, Garth, people come first. Yep. You know, it's people that make the difference, and it's people who come first. And I'm going to be really pushing hard for that social impact money within Cumbria to be spent in a different way. So rather than building a new centre for the coast to coast, which a lot of money is, sorry, if there's anybody on from Sellafield, I'm sorry, but putting the money into a new centre that's going to help fund something to do with the coast to coast, but not benefit local people. I want to see it benefiting local people and not going into maybe organisations who pay their own wages with it.
Yep.
So just following off on that, Andrea, I was combining the automation piece and the...
oh, yes, yeah, I forgot about that.
So what's your view on that one before I move on to Sutha? And,
okay, I'm not concerned about automation. I think what we've got to do, we've got to start right back at schools and education, because if you look at our education system, I'm not an educator either, so I apologise if I offend anybody on this. It's based on Victorian values, and it's based on strict regime, and you fit in this box. If you don't fit in that box, you're not part of this system. I think we've got to go right back to basics and change the way we educate and work with kids right from the start, and the way that we look for degrees in a certain way. I just think there's an opportunity here to change everything and look at jobs for the future with around automation. So when I was looking at robotic cafes, for example, I was looking to upskill the employees. So we wouldn't be employing any less number of people in the cafes that I was designing. But however, they would have technical jobs. They'd be data analysts, data scientists, technicians, and the robots would do the mundane, boring, repetitive tasks. And that's what I would like to see for automation. And so I'm not overly concerned about automation taking jobs, but we've got to be ready to change and upskill people.
Brilliant, Andrea. We speak from the same tune there. Sutha.
So let me left off where Andrea on automation. So absolutely on the same page. You know, you look at the history of humanity, technology and automation has only moved quality of life forward and lifted it, not deprived it. You know, nobody goes and adopts a technology or thing because it's going to make my life worse, right? But there is a need for to recognize where automation and technology may change things, how we do things today, and to help move people who are in that to the new way or different way or doing something different. So there is a recognition of where we need to have an understanding of where automation might impact and how do we address it. But overall, I think automation and technology is a good thing because it actually helps progressively drive the quality of life and humanity to a better place. So I really don't have any concerns about that. And I think it also helps us challenge areas where we normally might not be looking at and challenging it enough. In terms of employers, absolutely, I think very much on the page with Garth that, you know, employers have a responsibility. The way we look at it is responsibility to people. Be that be customers or be that be employees. You know, you look after your responsibility to people, and then everything else falls into place. And you know, again, COVID was a good ability to look at that, because you know, it was we needed to ensure that our services and what we do is, you know, especially in the lockdown period, was critical to make sure that people were able to interact, you know, socialize and work, all of those sort of things. At the same time, we needed to make sure we were balancing the welfare of our own people to keep that service going and deliver the service, etc. And we had to be operational. So, you know, it was a really good exercise of having to balance those things. But what became very clear was it's you know, as long as you're doing the right thing and investing or doing the right things for both people across, whether it's your employees or customers, then, you know, the right outcomes comes along. So, you know, I have worked for companies who have put up purposes and visions and missions. My general feeling is if somebody puts a purpose up, that's because there is a lack of purpose, right? Rather than, yeah.
Brilliant. I can just say the culture for Manx Telecom, all the interactions I've had with Manx Telecom people over the years have all been spot on. And you can always tell that the organisation by the people. And you know, you've got some great people there. Tony, what's your thoughts on this?
Well, starting with the people element, I'd just say, you know, there's never been a greater need for trust in the workplace, especially the new sort of virtual workplace. And, you know, let's face it, a lot of the older ways of working were probably based around a lack of trust. Yeah. You know, none of us loves working for a micromanager, you know, someone who tells you exactly not just what you're going to do, but how you're going to do it, and then monitors you exactly while you're doing it. You know, the form of leadership I've always striven for is one in which you sell a vision to your people and then let them get on with implementing it in their own unique personal ways. Often they'll surprise you about how they do that. And I think it's this latter style of leadership that is working in the new normal or the next normal, whatever we call it. And, you know, going back to the sort of the title of this event itself, you know, people need to be judged by the outcomes that they achieve, not by the set times they spend in an office achieving them. And this really, to me, is where the trust element comes in. In terms of automation, and, you know, this is something I've led very large teams in recent years who've been very concerned about, you know, their jobs being automated away. And I've stressed to them many times, I've stressed to clients in conference speeches around automation, that it's not jobs that are being automated away, but tasks, and that every job involves a whole range of different tasks. And why should our people be expected to do repetitive, mundane, rules-based working? You know, why don't we free them up to shine in those areas where humans alone are so strong? You know, creativity, empathy, leadership. You know, machines don't do those things well. You know, they're the things humans excel at, and let's actually get our people focusing more on those things. They'll be more productive, and they'll enjoy working more. And so, in a sense, I think we should be automating everything we possibly can, but in that way that liberates our people to be more productive and have better quality lives in general. And I also predict that through automation, but through digital transformation in general, we're going to unearth a whole host of new professions that, you know, were barely imaginable today, and that certainly had never been dreamt of even 5 years ago. And I do think employers, you know, as employers, we should be working more with our communities, and this starts with STEM programs in schools, you know, upwards. But ultimately, it's all, you know, we need to ensure that technology really is being used to help shape a better world for everybody.
Yeah, fantastic. Jason?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a hard line you have to take sometimes, because automation, we know from traditional sectors in particular where automation's been implemented into manufacturing processes, which everyone's right, these are traditionally very mundane tasks, that the reality is that automation has resulted in job losses in the past. But job losses and automation at the moment, I mean, automation can make a business leaner than it probably is as well. So it has to be, as an employer as well, you know, my mantra to my team when the day we came in and said, right, everyone's going home today and we don't know when we'll be back. It's a work from home for the next month, 2 months, 6 months, whatever. My key message was that this is a time for you to focus on you your families and your life. And if we're back in a month, then great. If we're back in 3 months, then that's how it is. And the attitude has to be that as long as the work gets done, I don't care when you work in reality, as long as what we have to do gets achieved and we still support the businesses that we're here to support through the incubator, then that's fine. We're doing our job. An employment contract doesn't have to state 9 to 5 or 8 to 4 or 10 to 6. It's a matter of these are your roles, your responsibilities, and your achievables, and that's how our business functions. And as long as we're hitting them, then you're working. But you know, it is difficult. Jobs are being laid off left, right, and centre across many different sectors, and we may just have to accept that automation will result in that business becoming leaner and therefore surviving. But the inevitability is some job losses. It's impossible to protect every job. In the UK, is running quite possibly the biggest state-sponsored unemployment scheme in the world at the moment, with the phrase of furlough, which I have to be honest, even I'd never heard of furlough before this pandemic kicked off. 11 million people in the UK on furlough. And I am worried for the UK economy on how many of those people are actually going to be made unemployed once the furlough scheme ends, which is going to be very, very soon. It's rapidly approaching. And I don't think businesses are prepared for that. You know, the Isle of Man's approach has been, we don't have furlough, we have a salary support scheme. So on paper, it pays less to the company per employee, but it also means that you can keep the employee working whilst they're being supported in their salary, which means that they're actually contributing net benefit to the business goals still whilst working from home. So you may not be able to afford to keep them on pay. So in the UK, you put them on furlough, whereas in the Isle of Man, we have a salary support scheme, pays less, and you can keep working towards your business goals to keep the people employed. To me, that works so much better. And upskilling is going to be a big challenge. I mean, we can talk about upskilling and retraining all we want, but let's just say, for argument's sake, even 25% of them 11 million people end up unemployed. It is going to be a mammoth task to reskill and retrain somewhere around 2.5, 3 million people in the next 12 months. It's going to be a ridiculous task. But they will, to me, those 2.5 people shouldn't look at life as a new job, a new career, whatever they want to do. Actually, those are 2.5 million possible entrepreneurs that should look at the economy. You know, everyone talks about crisis, and every business, pretty much every business is in crisis mode. But throughout the last 3-4 months, I have literally looked at every day as a new opportunity, because crisis creates opportunity, and it's how we work to address that. And that's one thing that, you know, some of the businesses we have either engage with us more actively, some just don't. And it's how do we support them to become more proactive in their thought process rather than looking all doom and gloom. Actually, what has this demonstrated? How can you do something to help other people be lean with your knowledge? So there's no reliance on relying on the government or companies to upskill. I think actually we should be encouraging individuals to look at their own lives during this time at home and say, actually, you know what? I could work out of a company bubble and I could self-achieve. And I think that's how we should look at it, actually. So I don't see automation at the moment as a problem. I think we should be embracing it if it results in a leaner business that allows a business to survive. And if it results in some job losses, I sound like a martyr at the moment, but if it sounds like for some job losses, it's actually better than the business failing overall. And we should always look at that as actually a positive. So difficult to stomach, but actually net benefit for the business and the economy.
Jason, I wholeheartedly agree with you. I see this as a period of massive opportunity. Whenever there's a downturn, it's very difficult to speak to people. It's very difficult to get hold of people. Yes. Now, you pick up the phone, and especially with the new technology, I'm meeting people around the world at a push of a button, where it would have taken me months, if not impossible, to get to these people. So we have to look at that opportunity. Now, I'm conscious we've only got 5 minutes left, so I'm going to try and combine the last two questions. One is and you've got a minute each on this because we've got 5 minutes, is the mental health side. How can we use technology to help with mental health? But then how do we see the landscape of technology moving forward in the next 5 to 10 years for the benefit of the human race? And we'll start off with Sutha first.
So I think again, when we moved from a very physical interaction to a remote interaction on using technology as the fundamental mechanism for interaction, I think that brought forward and top of mind the issue of mental health and well-being, right? So it was, every manager, every colleague was very much acutely aware of how do we ensure that the other person's well-being and mental health is being cared for and managed during this period, right? So I think it created a very high level of awareness. And when you're not in front of a person and you don't have your usual cues, I think you become more aware and you look for it more than you would normally do in a normal social environment. So I think it certainly has helped bring it to the forefront. So in that way, it's a good thing, and I think it'll keep it there. In terms of the general trend, I think, sorry, I'm just conscious of the time. I think it will continue to, the trend will continue to work towards improving quality of life.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
Thanks, Sutha. Tony.
Yeah, I've worked a lot over the last 10 years around the concept of the digital workplace, so any device, anytime, anywhere working, and it's been a real challenge with some companies embracing this, having their people out of the office, and we've had to do a lot of persona development, generational analysis, user-centered design, and so on. But what we're seeing now, and this has been all about the individual. That's the key thing, the message I've been trying to drive home. We're all different. We're all at different stages of our own career as well. So the way people are responding to the pandemic and the new ways of working are different person by person. And we have to recognize that. And when we said any device, anytime, anywhere, we didn't necessarily mean at home. It's anywhere. So it's, I think coming out the back of this, we need to have the technology in place to help people be productive in their own personal way. And that does, recognize people as individuals. And, that means we don't have a one-size-fits-all HR policy. We let people have that flexibility and try and recognize that what works well for someone does make, someone else anxious or stressful. So we just somehow need to factor in all of that good thinking in sort of these digital workplace concepts, but coming out the back of this and coming out with a much more flexible hybrid way of working. In terms of that bigger question about the user, yes, it's about technology, but it's about using technology just as a toolkit to actually create those human outcomes to make that world a better place. It's all about, to me, I've built a company around AI and data science because I think data is the one thing that's common through all this. Let's not forget global warming and climate change. They were the big issues until very, very, very recently. And a lot of people around the world are enjoying clearer skies now. But let's realize this pandemic will come to an end, and there will be a newer world beyond it. And some of those trends around the world are still happening. And let's try and find uses of technology that really address those things to absolutely ensure that future generations are going to enjoy a better world still.
Brilliant. Thanks, Tony. Jason.
Yeah, I mean, I said before, my mantra and attitude to my team was very simple. It was, this is a time, we're all going home now, and this is a time for you to focus on you, your families, and your personal life. I've got staff members that have got kids that are in their GCSE years that are worried about exam results, and parents are obviously really stressed about it. And we were really conscious of that. And it's a lot, for me, it was about making time, and my role is an enabler. And if my team member says, I'm struggling with this, or this is what's going on in my life, then it is my duty and my responsibility to enable them to deal with that and to do everything that I can to help them do it. I mean, I could be evil about it and say, ultimately we're a business and we have to look after ourselves. But for me, I'm very much, I talk about going to conferences and stuff. I'm all about people. I much prefer meeting people and dealing with people, and I treat my staff just as they are. They're humans, they're people. And, we all have our problems. I've lived in the Isle of Man for a good few years now. And I got used to only seeing my parents across in the UK every couple of months. But it's been a few months now. All I want to do is see my parents. So normally, whenever they say they're coming over, I sort of sit there and go, oh, God, not again. But all I want to do actually is see my parents at the moment, of all things. Our Tuesday pub quizzes haven't quite sufficed. So for me, there is a duty now in employers to enable their employees to take whatever time is necessary to deal with it. What I try and get into a habit with my team is every morning when they start work, they set a goal for the day and how they feel at the start of the day. And at the end of the day, they have to look at what was their goal for the day, have they achieved it, and how do they feel at the end of the day. And if they haven't achieved it, I want to know why and what can I do to help them achieve their work and life goals at the same time. And that goal doesn't have to be a work goal. It can be a life goal. It can be need to renew my car insurance today or whatever it is. And if they haven't achieved it, then if they've not been able to take time out to do a personal matter during the day like that, then something's gone wrong here. So little things like that is, for me, an obligation for us to enable people to achieve what they need to do. Thanks,
Jason. Andrea?
I'm probably not well qualified to talk about employees because I'm a really lean company. There's only me and one other. But I can give you, I completely agree with you, Jason. It's about enabling. I don't believe in set working 9 to 5. I believe in getting things done. And if you finish it at 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, whatever, go and have fun. What I am keen on, though, is health and well-being. And Vladdy, who I work with, I encouraged her to get more active, take up more sport, because it is all about feeling well and enjoying what you're doing. I never intend to have a big company because I don't want to be responsible for anybody else, because I'm more difficult of looking after myself. But I'm absolutely obsessed with my Fitbit, so I'm going to actually look at how I can look at my own health and wellness and how that affects how I do my job, so that I can maybe embed that into the way that my company operates and works. Because I believe that technology going forward should be an enabler to back up what you're doing and not the thing that actually drives your business. And if you can measure health and wellness as part of your overall company, fantastic. I did see a question about mental health. Really difficult subject in these times. I think the more we can do just to be supportive and work with everybody, absolutely, do whatever we can.
Brilliant. Thank you, Andrea. And Garth?
Never before has health and well-being been more important and taken more seriously than now. And the word that Tony used was trust. And all that happened was organizations had to trust their employees to work remotely. And they realized, guess what? They've done really well. And during a period of time, they have also produced even more. And guess what? The company is continuing to do well. So they start to ask more questions. How are you doing? Just these Zoom meetings, and you get to see inside someone's home. And you see a little bit more about what their whole environment is. You get to know them a little bit more. Things change. It's not just an employee anymore. As Jason says, you become a little bit more human. Data collection, technology can be a force for good by collecting data in such a way that includes your health and well-being. And that needs to be, in my opinion, written into the purpose of the organization and not just something that you stick on a wall sutra. It becomes part of what your organization is about, and therefore it is reported on at your board meetings. It is reported on every single meeting. How are my people doing? Because we have now realized that without our people, we have absolutely no organization. And that's what the government realized, by the way, when they came up with this furlough scheme, because they felt that that's the only way that they obviously would save money eventually in the long term, but they realized that they had to hold on to these employees because it has to be people first. And the people are not just employees, it's the customers as well. It's all about people in a business, in my opinion. Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you, Garth. Thank you, Tony. Thank you, Andrea. Thank you, Sutha. And thank you, Jason. And thank you, Bitter, for helping to Bitter Isle of Man and all the team, and Paul and Laura and Diane. It's been tremendous the way that the Bitter organisation has transformed itself into a really lean organisation to help to keep the community going. But we all can't wait to get together face to face and have our networking meetings and our lunches and get back to the way we were. One thing I'd like to say is my own passion is plastic eradication, and it's Plastic Free July, hashtag Plastic Free July. So do one thing if you can, everyone who's watching and in the audience, is take out one piece of plastic today and do the same tomorrow, and we'll have a better future together. So thank you very much, and I'll hand you back to Laura.